is my honor to introduce is a man of at least, I've got written here, 17 different hats. Benny Napoleon from Wayne County, Michigan, is not only law enforcement, but also a lifetime NAACP member. Also has his own private practice. Also a part-time professor. Also a basketball coach, a mentor, a father of someone pursuing her master's degree. And a tremendous progressive in all of this. And someone who I've heard ask the question, when was the last time in a black freedom struggle we asked for more state surveillance? Right, surveillance. When does that happen? Right? So if we're doing that, we must be at a new moment, right, with new leadership. So please join me in welcoming Sheriff Benny Napoleon.
So good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Field, the real Dr. Field. I've been told that the Attorney General's arrival is imminent and that I could speak as long as I want to, as long as I'm done in 5 minutes. So I will be briefer than maybe I had anticipated. I'd like to thank Congressman Conyers and the Congressional Black Caucus for putting together this very important discussion. I was interested as I heard Phil talk about my career. I think after hearing everybody, I've been doing this 41 years now. And it's hard to look back and see that 41 years later, we're still having the same discussion. The same very issues that we've talked about in law enforcement, no matter how progressive we have tried to be in this. We have achieved the mantle of leadership as African Americans in this great nation, leading many of the largest police departments in this country. We have challenges. Those challenges have not gone unnoticed. We have recruiting issues. What goes in determines how good it is coming out. If you fail at your recruiting effort to bring the right folks in, you're not going to have the right agency. I heard Chief Hite talk about Officer Friendly. I'd like to have known Officer Friendly as a young man growing up in the city of Detroit, but we didn't have any Officer Friendlies. We had stress. We had a very challenging police agency, one that did not represent the community that it was serving. That's why recruiting is important. Something as simple as being willing to live in the community that you want to police is critical. Yet we no longer require it in the city of Detroit. As I was challenging residency in the elimination of it as a chief of police and going to lawmakers to say this is bad policy, how is it that a person could live 100 miles away from a city that's 90% African American in a community that doesn't look anything like the community that they want to police, and visit that city only 10 times in their life and then become a police officer in it? There's something wrong with that policy. Education is key. Training, supervision, discipline, retention. We are in turbulent times, folks. It's worse than it was in the 60s. And the sad part is there are people who think that everything is okay. You heard how some leadership says what you saw is all right. Policy was followed. I can tell you that as I go to my seat, and I want to be brief because I'm going to respect the Attorney General, that there's not one person sitting on this podium who believes that selling cigarettes on the streets of this nation should warrant a death sentence. There's not one person sitting on this dais that believes that running from the police in this country warrants a death sentence. There's not one person sitting here who believes that surrendering with your hands up deserves a death sentence. We want to change things. Thank you.
was given the high sign that the Attorney General's approach was imminent, and I passed that high sign along, you will forgive us if we are eager for her arrival, and perhaps eager by a couple of extra minutes. So with that, thank you very much. It is my pleasure, while I watch the door to make sure I get to take this pleasure right now. Those of us who grew up in communities where there were church elders, mosque elders, there were community elders who had not just wisdom for us, but genius that went untapped. Because of the ways in which the eyes of this country avoided the reality and the humanity of our communities. Y'all know the person I'm talking about, right? Aunt Florence, Uncle Willie, right? Ain't related to nobody in the community, but they Aunt Florence or Uncle Willie. Okay. That genius in the last generation or so has started to be able to come through. Okay? And I want to introduce one of those geniuses to you in Ron Scott. Ron Scott has more than 40 years of experience in activism, radio, television, and has recently won the Unsung Heroes Award from the CBC. Okay? Not just for co-founding the local chapter of the Black Panther Party, not just for sitting on the board of the Boggs Institute, right, but for having genius that can translate the experiences of communities and make it legible for people who are aliens to it, who are strangers to it. Okay. Talk about many hats. He has just issued a blogging pamphlet that y'all can get online on what to do about police abuse of force. Right, and I highly recommend that you go ahead and talk to him about that. He'll give you the URL when we get to it. I have a list here. Everybody's bio is incredibly impressive. This list is 5-point font and double-sided. So I'm not going to go through all of the awards won. But I do want you to understand we have really an icon whose time is, as we continue to re-explore and re-understand our own history, we will continue to grow in our appreciation for this man. Please join me in welcoming Ron Scott to the dais.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to obviously thank Congressman Conyers for being on the front lines. I think I met the congressman shortly after he went to Congress, and we've both been fighting similar battles. I'm glad to be here every year to do this. 3-4 years ago, when I was here, I mentioned police militarization. People sort of looked at it, they thought about it, they said, oh yeah, militarization. I said, I guarantee you, in the next few years, you're going to be talking about it and you're going to experience it. It happened. It didn't happen just because it was seen on television or because somebody caught it on video, but we were experiencing it at the time. So I urge you, when you deal with these things, listen to the people in your community who are fighting these battles every day, every night, all the time. I think about those dark alleys I go into. I think about my friends with mothers of murdered children. When I go and I see the brains of people on the floor, I think about those things. And it's not a television scenario. It is what we do every day. Make your life committed to fighting for justice, safety, and the end of violence. I want to say this. The end of violence on both ends. It's not just the police. Because we have another primary entity called Peace Zones for Life, where we intervene in resolving conflict before the police get there. Because 80% of the calls they have are domestic violence. I mean, men on men, women on women, and so forth. And we found it. When we discovered it, had a guy who was shot by the police. Before it was over, it was because of a domestic violence situation. And we didn't have what we used to call the Big Mama factor. Because whenever Big Mama used to intervene, she could quell that. She didn't intervene this time. So Dennis Crawford died. The baby mama and her family and the family of Dennis Crawford wanted to shoot each other. We had to have 2 funerals. So that helped us develop Peace Zones for Life. where we intervene and do conflict resolution and mediation, and we also do economic development so that we can resolve some of our issues before the police get there. How is it that some other people in this country can resolve conflict before it happens, and we turn around and say, okay, well, we got to call the police. That's the only option we have. I know that Sheriff Napoleon would rather get there and resolve it, and it be resolved. I'm going to be very short. We had an incident on the east side of Detroit where two people were going to shoot each other. We intervened, started resolving the conflict. By the time the police got there, they said they would call for a fight between 40 people. We told them it wasn't a fight between 40 people. By this time, the people in the neighborhood, people who stand at the liquor store, they said, no, we intervened. We resolved it. We stopped the fight. And you know who the fight was going to be between? It was from the neighborhood underground pharmaceutical operator. and he had to keep his street cred, and the 16-year-old stole a bike. Now the neighborhood underground pharmaceutical operator is working on what we have as a Peace Zones for Life Peace Park, and he is running a barbecue outfit. And he joined the Coalition Against Police Brutality. Now, the other thing is, as the Secretary comes here, I want to say this loud and clear. We had a federal consent decree. Sheriff Napoleon will remember in Detroit for over 10 years. It's come along still to some degree. Police departments that do not comply, and I mean on a daily level, they get a lot of money from the Justice Department. That money from the Justice Department, I mean for everything from jackets to whatever else, that money should not go to them when there is a problem. I don't mean after a consent decree, I mean when they apply for it. When they apply for the multi-jurisdictional task forces. We just had a guy killed in Detroit by ICE. Multi-jurisdictional task forces. And they spent 113 days before the information was released. No transparency. ICE, many of the other agencies involved in that, said this young man had a weapon. I don't know whether he did or not. The prosecutor didn't go forward with it. But nonetheless, 113 days, family members who saw the shooting had to wait before they could get any information. So essentially, that money, there are all kinds of multi-jurisdictional task forces. Now, Sheriff, I know some of them are decent, some of them are not. But the money should be withheld until such time as there's some clarity about shootings, confrontations, and so on. Finally, I'm going to close with this. What is policing? We talk about policing. In Detroit, we have an entity that is not police. It's called we have a entity, it's like a public safety entity that you can establish police authorities. And these police authorities sometimes are run by security guards. They're not police. We have a guy named Dan Gilbert who's buying up all the property in Detroit. He has a police authority. He has his own police force. And in the future, you're going to see it more. You're going to see more of that. More diminishment of what we call public safety and law enforcement, and more of the police authorities. So essentially, as we look at policing, we ought to expand our framework in terms of how we deal with this particular matter. And I want to say, frankly, I don't use the term police that much anymore. I use public safety, because if you haven't read it, Sir Robert Peel, who had 9 principles, all officers in here know what I'm talking about, 9 principles of policing, started in what became the London Metropolitan Police Department in 1829. And he said, the people are the police, and police are the people. We only suspend those things to the police that we allow them to do. You have to put Big Mama back in the equation. You have to make sure that we resolve these things ourselves. And we have to make sure that we are strong on resolving our conflicts as we are talking about the police who are shooting us. Taser International, I have to say this. Taser International, and we have a case with a kid that was killed. Taser International does virtually all of the video in relationship to the weapons, and they're getting rich, and they're a major lobby. So when we talk about body cams and cams on guns, think about you dealing with a multi-billion-dollar industry. So look for some black folks or otherwise that do the same thing, that have a more progressive agenda than Taser International. I say to you goodbye, but I say good luck in your communities with oversight, because you must have oversight. If you don't have that, I mean, more than a review board, I'm not disagreeing, but more than a review board, Coleman Alexander Young, the late